Am Stunned by the Evil Part 1. April 2, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. I just received this from a friend who caught it circulating around the Patriot Community from Sun-Tzu, the operator of Nesara News, who is actually Jeff Dougherty from Portland, Oregon, and I must say that I am stunned by the sheer evil of this man and the nature of his lies. He really takes it over the top. So that you can all see now what kind of duplicitous scum he and his pals at Michigan General Jural Assembly really are, I want you to do yourselves a favor and do two things. Read the quote from him about me and my message below, and then compare it with my letter to Cardinal George that he is deliberately misquoting, either by reading the text of it posted immediately below his big lie misrepresentation, or by going to my website where the letter to Cardinal George has been posted for several years. See for yourselves how these sons of Satan twist the meaning of things and prey upon people with poor reading skills. Read what he said about what I said and then read what I actually said for yourselves. You will know the truth. Sun-Tzu aka Jeff Dougherty said, "I see that you guys are passing Anna's paperwork back and forth. I would ask you to please refer to the documents that we've posted on Nesara News, exposing Anna's fraud. She says it openly on her blood oath to the Vatican. She is required by spiritual law to inform us that she is bringing a fraud against us, and she says it outright. I would be putting my soul in jeaopardy if I did not inform you that I am bringing this fraud against the states." Notice she does not say state of states. In other words, she is bringing the fraud against the assemblies, we the people. Here's what I actually said. I, too, stand with the Universal Catholic Church, founded by Christ. This is not the Roman Church, this is the Universal Catholic Church that the Lutheran Church I grew up in is part of. My blood seal stands upon the record of the Vatican Chancery Court in witness because I brought suit against them and had to do it in blood or they would not give me standing to address the canon law of what I am going to show you tonight. I am from a family that has served the Catholic Church since the First Holy Roman Empire, hereditary Grand Marshals of the Holy Roman Empire, Knights of the Holy Sepulchre. I have myself served as an international services agent and as a private attorney in service to His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI and now, Pope Francis. This is true, again, the Universal Catholic Church, which, if you stop and think about it, is where all your families started out too. You must believe that I am in deadly earnest both about the seriousness of the criminality engulfing America and the danger this poses to the Church and to the rule of law. The canon law of the Church stands above every other form of law, and the Roman Curia above all other courts. This is speaking about equity courts, obviously. Even the Uniform Commercial Code, which was developed by the Curia as a just means to resolve the many international disputes and claims arising from the 1930 bankruptcies of the G5 nations, is copyrighted by Unidroit, a subsidiary of the Vatican. This is pointing out their liability and power to correct the mess. The organization which failed and which plunged America into this desperate criminality was originally chartered by the Church as a religious nonprofit corporation. More proof of their liability, the Roman Catholic Church chartered the United States of America, Inc. in Delaware in 1925. We, sir, the Christian churches, are up to our ears in culpability for the circumstance herein discussed, and both the Pope Emeritus and Pope Francis have duly considered all the issues and acting in their temporal capacities, have rendered judgment as international trustees of the United States Trust 1789, recognizing the breach of trust and the criminality which has been practiced against the American states and the American state citizens. They admitted it. They have both taken strong action to begin addressing the circumstance. This is coming next as what they did about it. Pope Benedict XVI acted to create a new office in the Postal Service, establishing a regional postmaster for North America. Pope Francis has issued his first apostolic letter, the Motu Proprio of July 11, 2013, rewriting the International Criminal Code as part of his continuing effort to address this situation, and has more recently addressed the United Nations and collapsed the worldwide derivatives market. This is not about any responsibility of the electorate. It is about the Church's responsibility to support the Pope in his role as the ultimate trustee of the global estate, to uphold the rule of law, and to make correction for a grave breach of trust that continued for 165 years and which has cost millions of innocent lives. We can only confess our sins, dear Cardinal, admitting as mere mortals our desperate need for grace and rising up each day to do what we can and must. I direct your attention to the Treaty of Paris, which ended the American Revolution, and the corollary Treaty of Versailles. There are 3 international trustees named as caretakers of the United States Trust, 1789. They are the Pope, in his temporal office, the British monarch, and the United States Postmaster, civil. Now I direct your attention to the Treaty of Westminster, 1794, in which the city-state of Westminster and the Crown Temple pledge amity in perpetuity with the newly formed United States. Next, I direct your attention to the Treaty of Verona, 1845, in which the then Pope and the British monarch, both trustees of the American National Trust, agreed that the representative form of government was incompatible with divine right of kings and with papal supremacy, and so both acted in secretive breach of trust. The British monarch issued letters of marque and reprisal to the members of the Bar Association, British Crown Commercial Company, which issued licenses to privateers to attack American vessels in international jurisdictions of the law. That, sir, is the genesis of Bar Association licenses. A license, as you must know, is permission to engage in an act which would otherwise be illegal. The Americans responded by quickly passing an amendment to their constitution effectively barring attorneys from holding public office. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln, a bar attorney, was elected President of the United States Commercial Company but could not lawfully act as the President of the United States of America, Major. This is why representatives of 11 southern states refused to be seated and left the Congress adjourned sine die. In 1863, Lincoln was forced to bankrupt the original trust management company doing business as the United States. After years of bankruptcy reorganization known euphemistically as Reconstruction, a new trust management organization was incorporated by the Church, doing business as the United States of America, Inc. This entity operated under church auspices from the end of the Reconstruction to 1912, when the trust management organization was purchased by a consortium of banks doing business as the Federal Reserve. By 1913 they had pushed through the Federal Reserve Act, and via legal tender laws began a purposeful agenda to devalue the American dollar and bankrupt the original corporation doing business as the United States of America, Inc. In May of 1930, the G5 nations declared international bankruptcy via joint treaty entered into at the Geneva Conventions. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the representative of the Federal Reserve DBA United States of America, Inc. 3 years later, having been elected president, he declared domestic bankruptcy as well. One of his first acts was to illegally confiscate privately held American gold, which was never repaid. As the United States of America, Inc. was being prepared for bankruptcy, agents throughout the Congress and the individual states of the Union rushed through a process of registering franchises. They created states of states merely named after the actual geographically defined American states. They also created foreign situs trusts named after each and every living American. At the March 6, 1933, Conference of Governors meeting, the governors, merely corporate officers of franchises of the bankrupt United States of America, Inc., pledged the good faith and credit of their states and the citizenry thereof to stand as sureties for the debts of the United States of America, Inc. during its bankruptcy reorganization. Imagine that Burger King International went bankrupt in the UK and it called all the local franchise owners together and they all agreed to name their customers as sureties for their corporate debts. That is what happened in America in 1933. The victims weren't told a word about this. The perpetrators were rewarded by the bankers with access to virtually unlimited credit, hypothecated against the assets of the American states and the private property of the American state citizens. All this credit cost the bankers nothing material, as they had inculcated a fiat money system. Issuing credit, money of account, cost them nothing but the time to enter digits in an account ledger. In exchange for this favor to the politicians, they were rewarded with legal tender laws allowing this system to exist in America, and given surreptitious title to all real property assets in America, and provided with protection for their activities by the members of the bar associations. In 1944, FDR quit-claimed all the juicy service contracts and the assets used to service these governmental service contracts to the IMF. The IMF took over from the Federal Reserve, gaining control of every logo, name, title, department, and agency of the United States of America, Inc., what Americans believe to be their government, right down to the flag. They charted a new trust management organization in France doing business as the United States, Inc. and moved in. They also took over the state franchises and opened their own state of _blank franchises. For the past 70 years they have enslaved the people of America and plundered the assets of the United States Trust 1789. The creditors who forced the bankruptcy of the United States of America, Inc. included the World Bank, the International Bank of Development and Reconstruction, and the Federal Reserve, but the priority creditors named in the 1934 Bankruptcy Act were the American states and the American state citizens. The banks, being aware of their own schemes, named the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico to act as their chosen bankruptcy trustee. See Federal Title V for details. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico seized all the bogus states on paper and Americans on paper created by the Roosevelt administration and rolled all the assets presumed to be part of these trusts into Roman inferior trusts, Sestuike Vi trusts, operated in the name of the foreign situs trusts Roosevelt created. Thus, a living man denoted properly as John Quincy Adams was misrepresented as a foreign situs trust doing business as John Quincy Adams, and then this entity was declared dead, presumed missing at sea, by the perpetrators of this massive identity theft scheme, and all the assets of John Quincy Adams were rolled over into a Roman inferior trust doing business as John Quincy Adams. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico also removed all these Roman inferior trusts to Puerto Rico for safekeeping, where they came under the foreign jurisdiction of the Puerto Rican Commonwealth and the UK. There they were enslaved and taxed for the privilege of importing revenue to Puerto Rico, otherwise known as the income tax. All this was done in the name of winning World War II. The claims against the American assets supplied the credit to boot up the war industry effort and seizing the estates of the Americans and redefining individual Americans as chattel belonging to their own estates allowed a means of conscripting millions of men into the armed services. After the war, nothing changed. The perpetrators never retooled American industry. They just went on pumping out armaments and selling arms and borrowing money against assets they never owned and enslaving the American people to the tune of Yankee Doodle Dandy. Over the years, the criminality of the arms dealers has become a terrible worldwide problem. They branched out from simply selling weapons and promoting war, to selling drugs and running gambling and prostitution rings, booze and cigarettes, and every form of vice, violence, and viciousness. They also used their position of trust as the government to manipulate commodity and stock markets, and control natural resources belonging to the American people for private gain. And the Church is culpable, because at the broader base, the Church knew and did nothing. The Roman Church, continued to mindlessly operate on the directives established by the Treaty of Verona and never re-examined the disastrous consequences of all this for humanity, much less the hideous theft and abuse practiced upon the Americans, incalculable amounts of labor siphoned off, incalculable material losses, and millions of lives lost or maimed in wars for profit. To that, you and your peers have turned a blind eye and shrugged, and said, it's the responsibility of the voters. The same voters who have been purposefully misled and self-interestedly abused, kept in the dark, manipulated, defrauded, and robbed. By their employees and those they trusted to act in their behalf? By the Supreme Pontiff, who was obligated by solemn treaty to act as their trustee. It's with good reason that the higher administrators of the Church have been reluctant to expose the criminality or deal with it, for fear that the Church would be blamed. Continued in Part 2, the link is in this YouTube video description.